Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a full comparison between a 2021 Honda Civic and a 2022 Honda Civic to see what the real differences are. First and foremost though, a huge shout out and thank you to Stockton 12 Honda for giving me some time with both of these Civics. Check out their inventory in the link below. Let's get straight into the video. Now let's pop under the hoods of both of the Civics to kind of go over the changes with the powertrains. So first off, in terms of the naturally aspirated option you can get in the previous generation Civic, that is unchanged with the new Civic. So the 2-liter still puts out 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque. Now, as for the 1.5-liter turbo, which this particular Civic hatchback has, in the previous generation, the 2021, it had 174 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque in most of the trim packages. In the Civic Hatchback Sport and the Sport Touring, it had 180 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque, routed through a CVT automatic. But for the new Civic, like I said, the 2-liter is unchanged in terms of power outputs, but the 1.5-liter turbo now puts out 180 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. So basically what they've done is they've given you the higher performance variant of the 1.5-liter in the new Civic across the lineup, instead of having to get a particular package with the Civic to get those higher power outputs. So that's definitely a cool change under the hood, and yeah, well, that's both of the Civics. Now let's quickly go over the exterior elements to go over what has changed with the Civic, and you can see from a front end perspective quite a bit, but there are some similarities. So first, starting off with the old Civic, you can see that everything kind of has more of, I don't know what other way to put it, as kind of like a racer type appearance to it with the front end. You've got all these kind of aggressive lines all coming to a single point, and you actually still get LED accent lighting with the previous generation. You still have the fog lights down below, and then notice with the front end how they've kind of blacked out a couple of the elements. But notice this part right here, because it's pretty similar with both of the cars. There's a subtle change though. Coming over to the new Civic, it just looks more mature. I don't know what other way to put it. It just looks like it has kind of grown up a little bit, right? This is kind of like a teenage looking car, whereas this one looks like a more adult type car, basically. You can see that the lines are not nearly as harsh, and there's not as much going on with the front end. Just looks a lot cleaner overall. But notice this part right here, it's somewhat similar in terms of the shape. But yeah, the front end definitely has some differences with both of the Civics. Now coming to the side, we've got two 35mm tires on 18-inch wheels with the new one. On the old one, we've got two 15mm tires on 17-inch wheels. So there is a little bit of a size difference, and then also a design difference as well. You can see the design here on the previous generation Civic with the wheel. It's a pretty good looking wheel. The new one, however, I think it looks significantly better, and you know guys, I really like the blacked out look overall, especially with this particular paint color and the silver. Definitely creates nice contrast with the car. And then coming to the mirrors, notice the whole shape has changed with the mirrors themselves, so there is definitely that. And then coming to the side of the car, again, you've got kind of like all these aggressive lines on the previous generation, whereas the new one, everything's kind of been smoothed out a little bit is the best way to put it. And then same thing in the back with the tire and wheel setup. Now coming here to the very rear with both of the Civics, this is where things look pretty crazy. Now obviously this isn't a perfect comparison, but let's get into it. So we'll start off with the trunk area, and then we'll finish everything off with the rest of the rear. So coming here to the previous generation Civic, here is the look at the trunk area and the storage space. And this is what I've noticed is pretty much unchanged. It looks pretty similar, spare tire underneath that area. And then you've got that to lower down the seats in the back. And then coming over to the new Civic, like I said, it looks pretty similar from a storage space perspective with both of these. And then underneath, again, spare tire as well. And then we'll close both of the trunks with them so you guys can see. And good thing I got sedans for both of them, so that the comparison is a little bit more fair, even though they're not the exact same trim package. So again, you can see that this one looks just more dressed up, more mature. It looks kind of more on like the luxury side almost, whereas this one, again, it kind of has that more kind of race type vibe. There's just a lot more going on, right? You've got the little spoiler here at the top. You can see the shape with the lights is pretty crazy. And then coming down below, pretty clean with here. The exhaust tip is there at the bottom, but then you've got the fake venting back here, whereas with the new one, again, it's really cleaned up, right? You just kind of have the lip here where it kind of comes up, and then look at the taillights. They don't look nearly as crazy, I guess is the best way to put it. And then coming over here, you can see the exhaust tip sticking out the back, and again, it kind of just looks like a more modern looking car. I kind of mentioned this in my Civic review. It kind of looks like an Audi A4 from the back end in a way. But yeah, that's everything for the back. Now let's go over the passenger area here in the rear. So first off, notice that we've got this cloth trim right here on the side, the window control. I love the new door handles. And then here are the seats in the new Civic. So we've got a mixture of cloth with the leather there on the sides of the seats. And then you can kind of see that there's no venting or anything right there. But overall, definitely nice back seating area. And then if we close the new one and open up the old one, notice there's a little bit more going on. So we've got the kind of, here's a better look at the trim there on the side of the door panel. Sorry about the sun today, it's horrible. And then you've got the cloth trim right here, and then we can see the full cloth seats here in the back. Notice that you actually have a pull down cup holder area, and then coming over here, still no vents or anything like that, but yeah, a little bit of a difference. Boom. Now coming to the door panel here in the front, again, you've got like cloth here on the side, and then just down below, all of our window controls, the mirror adjustments, the release for the trunk in the back. And then here are the front seats. You can see the bolstering and everything with them. They are power adjustable because this one is an EX package. And then you can see the pedal layout just down below with the hood latch release. And then that's the collision assistance, stability control, the lane departure. The steering wheel is manually adjustable. And there's somewhere to look before we pop into the old Civic. Now let's briefly go over everything in the old Civic. So you can see leather wrapped steering wheel. We've got some nice stitching there in the center. We've got our cruise control on this side with the lane keep assist, controls for the center stack, phone controls, all that fun stuff. Light stock / turn signal stock, windshield wiper stock on the other side. And then here is the gauge cluster in the old Civic. So you guys know it kind of has that like retro video game type look to it. And then there is an econ mode that we can pop into. You guys probably can hear the AC go up and down. When you go into eco mode, it brings down the AC so you save on fuel. I think that's pretty interesting. And then coming here to the center, if I pop it into reverse, there's what the backup camera looks like here with the previous generation Civic. And then just notice how this all looks because it's quite a bit different with the new Civic. But overall, good infotainment system, response time and everything is pretty decent. And yeah, it's pretty easy to use. We do have dual zone climate in this, and then we do have heated seats as well. And then down below, we've got some extra storage right here. And then here's the shifter for that CVT. And then notice we've got a brake hold with the parking brake, the eco mode over here. And then here's the center console layout with the previous generation. And then you guys can see the trim up here and then down below. And then there's with the glove box. And then finishing things up top, we do have a sunroof here. And then the controls for the sunroof are right there. And yeah, that's all. Now coming to the door panel here with the new Civic, a little bit different in terms of the design, but you still have the cloth right here. Notice this all looks just a little bit more modern, well put together, if that makes sense. The seats are actually pretty similar, a little bit different with the design touches on them, but you guys can see the seats are pretty similar. Manually adjustable here on this one, and then you can see the pedal layout down below, and that's for the safety tech and the stability control. Again, manually adjustable steering wheel, and there's one more look before we pop into the new Civic. Now let's kind of focus on the changes. So first off, we still have a leather wrap steering wheel. The stitching looks a little bit different, and then the controls are pretty much the same, but again, how they look is a little bit different. They just kind of look and feel a little bit nicer. Paddles on the back, the stocks are the same. And then here for the gauge cluster, has a more modern look, and again, it kind of has a more mature look is the best way for me to describe it with the center stack. We do have some more drive modes with this. We've got our sport, we've got our normal, and then we've got our econ mode. So we do have a couple more drive modes than the previous Civic. Same thing with the air conditioning. When you go in the econ mode, it kind of dials things back, which is pretty interesting. Now here with the infotainment system, notice that instead of being integrated into the dash, it's just kind of on top of the dash. Now from a camera system perspective, it looks identical with both of the cars, like all the functionality is the same. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, the new one does respond better. You still have like analog controls with it, but the touch response time on it seems to be just slightly quicker than the previous generation. The vent situation is definitely cooler here in the new one. I love the design here. And then with how you change the direction of airflow is cool, and it goes all the way across the dash. Single zone climate here in this particular package. And then the USB definitely integrated nicer compared to the previous generation because it's not just like a wire sticking out. And then you guys can see still get the shifter in a line. Some cup holders right here. The design around this area is definitely nicer. And then the drive mode select, auto stop start. This is for the parking brake, and then the brake hold. Here's the center console with more cloth on top. You can see the center console is a little bit more usable, if that makes sense. It's more normal than the previous generation. And then pretty regular glove box. And then if we finish things here at the top, we've got an all black headliner here, still no sunglass holder, and then we've got the manual mirror dimmer function. Now let's quickly get into pricing with the Civics. So the new Civic in the sport package stickers for about $24,000, and then the old Civic in the EX package with the 1.5 liter turbo stickers for about $25,000. So they're almost the same price, and so it does beg the question, should you get a more loaded up previous generation or a less loaded up new generation? Now that we've done our quick walk around on both of the Civics, let's take them out, see how they drive, and see if there's any driving differences between them. Let's quickly go over visibility with the previous generation Civic, so you guys can see visibility of the hood through both of the mirrors, and then the rest of the rear. And let's set off. We are setting off here in the previous generation Civic, and let's talk about how this drives, and then we'll drive the new one and see if the new one drives any different. So first off, from a ride quality perspective, it's pretty good. It's relatively smooth. Something that's awesome about the Civics just across the lineup from something like this all the way up to the Civic Type R is they just have this innate sporty feel to them. The steering has this really nice directness to it, and you actually do get a little bit of feeling through the steering wheel as well, and so it lends to kind of like a sportier driving experience. And then notice this does have the turn signal camera on it, so when you turn the turn signal on, it'll pop that on. And also bear with me with the AC sound. It's probably a little bit loud in this video, but like it's 102 degrees today, and so like I need it so that I don't just die. But other than that, what else about the previous generation Civic? The seat's relatively comfortable. I don't think that that's going to be too different from the cars because the seats look like they're pretty much the same. I didn't really notice too many differences with that. And then we'll see if there's any visibility differences, but I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being relatively the same. And then aside from that, turn-in's great. Yeah, this 1.5 liter turbo is such a good engine. Obviously, it's not the base model engine. It's kind of like the middle of the line because then you have the SI above this, and then you've got the Civic Type R above that. But kind of as like a, I guess, your entry-level performance engine, it's a really solid engine. We're gonna get our acceleration here with this 1.5 liter turbo. Whoo! Got that VTEC, bro, right? Had to make that reference. But that's the thing about Honda powertrains is they have this characteristic at the last few RPMs where they pull just a little bit more, and then right, you shift gears. Even in the base model engines, it still does that. It's such an interesting driving experience, and it adds this level of excitement to it. But this definitely feels like a sporty car, even though this is kind of supposed to be more on the, I guess, commuter car side of things. It's supposed to be just fuel economy conscious and all that, and sportiness isn't necessarily supposed to be part of it. It has this sporty feel to it. It's still comfortable to drive, but this is actually a car that you can have a little bit of fun with because of the driving dynamics, because it kind of has that more exciting edge to it from a driving perspective. And that'll get me into summing things up with the previous generation Civic. So first off, from an exterior styling perspective, again, it kind of has a sportier look to it. It's kind of, again, more childish is the best way for me to put it. And then from a driving perspective, I really like how it drives. The turn-in feels great, the steering feels great. It has this sporty, fun edge to it that makes it kind of exciting to drive. Even though it has a CVT, even though it doesn't have a monstrous amount of power, it's still a fun experience overall. And so yeah, that's kind of the high point of the previous generation Civic. Is it's a comfortable car you could daily drive, but then there's also this extra layer of excitement to it, especially with this turbocharged engine, that just makes it a fun experience. Let's talk about visibility here in the new Civic before we set off. So there's your visibility through the hood, both of the mirrors, and then throughout the rest of the rear. There's not really a huge visibility difference. They're both pretty similar. And also, I did forget to mention this early in the video. There is a difference with the key fobs. So you can see this is the new one, this is the old one. Controls are the same, but the new one definitely looks just a little, I mean, they're the same materials, they're both plastic and all that kind of stuff, but the new one just looks a little bit better. So there's that. Let's set off. We are setting off in the 2022 Civic here now. And again, this video is going to double for our Civic comparison and also for the driving review on the new 2022 Civic. And first off, let's talk about how this drives compared to the last generation. So in terms of the suspension and everything, feels pretty similar in terms of the smoothness. This feels like it might be a little bit smoother, a little bit better put together, but it's not a huge difference. Even driving these back to back, there's not really that much of a perceivable difference. And so they're both pretty much equally smooth. Now let's see if this one, the other one has the turn signal camera, this one does not. So I mean, I guess the other one has that going for it. But again, this one's a Sport, whereas the other one's an EX. So this is technically a lower down model, even though this one costs a little, or not a little bit more, about the same amount of money as the other one. What I'm going to do is actually pop it over into the Sport mode for us, so that when we get our acceleration up here, we'll get that. But the other thing I want to mention is these seats do feel about the same between both of the Civics, so there's not really a huge difference there. They feel pretty much the same on the bolstering, comfort, all that kind of stuff. Now as for the steering, definitely interesting. So the previous generation, I feel like there's almost a little bit more feel, whereas this one, it feels like the steering's a little bit lighter, if that makes sense. It feels, I mean, pretty much about the same in terms of directness. There's just not as much feel, and it feels like this steering rack is a little bit on the lighter side of things. Now let's get our acceleration here. So again, this one has the 2-liter, which isn't going to perform nearly as well as the 1.5 because it has less power, less torque, and we're about 4,500 feet elevation. So you're not going to get as much power loss with that 1.5 liter, this turbocharged, versus this one. You will get a little bit more power loss, but it still does a good job with the CVT. And again, it's identical in terms of the power outputs to the previous generation 2-liter, so nothing's been changed there. What I will say is, if you have the money to get a 1.5 liter, I would recommend getting it, because you're pretty similar with fuel economy, but that one just feels so much better, especially at elevation here. Now, aside from the acceleration part of things, yeah, there's definitely a difference. This feels more like a grand touring car, whereas the other one feels more like a sporty type, I wouldn't say sports car, sporty type car that you could daily drive. So there is definitely a perceivable difference in the characteristic with both of the cars. Again, this feels more grown up. It feels like this one is the more mature option to go for, right? It's like the previous generation Civic is the car you get because you want to drive around, have fun, all that kind of stuff, whereas this is like the serious car that you get because you've kind of grown up a little bit. And it's interesting, the feel. This definitely feels more like it's going towards the luxury car side of things, so that's definitely interesting that Honda has gone that route. Now, aside from that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else really. Like, I definitely like the overall look of this interior wise compared to the last one. I feel like it just, again, looks nicer from a design standpoint. And so yeah, let's actually just sum things up here with this new Civic. So exterior wise, there's not as much going on, and so I think a lot more people are going to like this in terms of the aesthetics, because it's just not as shouty and flashy as the last generation. Interior wise, it's just as nice, if not, well, actually, I'd say it's a little bit nicer. So like some of the touch points definitely are nicer, but from a design standpoint, I feel like they're both really nice. This one just has nicer materials, so it's got that going for it. And then from a driving perspective, this feels more luxury, whereas the other one feels more on the sporty side of things. So I guess then it would depend on what your preference is in terms of driving. If you want more of a luxury feel, the new Civic. If you want more of a sporty feel, than the previous generation Civic. But there is a little bit of a perceivable difference with them. They're both great cars though, and so it would be a tough choice, but this one definitely it's not like a massive improvement, but it's just enough that you can actually really perceive a difference other than the exterior elements that are different. Now let's get some things up with our comparison between the old Civic and the new Civic. Again, a huge shout out and thank you to Stockton 12 Honda for giving me some time with both of the Civics. Check out their inventory in the link below. I'll see all of you in the next video.